first reader is forest poet Lee Mackenzie, and Lee and Angelena are both going to read a couple of poems each. Lee is a poet and artist from Redditch in Worcestershire originally. He is assistant editor at Neon Books, and his poems have been published in the New European, Birmingham Poetry Literary Journal, and Coast to Coast to Coast. Currently is working on Poetry Maps, an Arts Council funded interdisciplinary project combining poetry, cartography, and the visual arts. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lee Mackenzie.
Hello, everybody. It's very nice for you to all be here, and I want to thank Paul for putting me on. I'm looking forward to Angelena, Sarah, and Sarah speaking in a little while. I'm going to share my screen now because you're going to be able to see what I've been working on with Poetry Maps, which is trying to meld the two ideas together. So I shall share my screen and then you should be able to see the first map. Can anybody see that? Just wave at me if you can, sort of thumbs up or anything. Fantastic. So you would be faced with this just if you came to it somewhere online or in a gallery, just to read as you wish, but I've sort of written it with a path in mind. As you can see, it's Oz. It's Frank Baum's map that he drew, I think in a second or third book, actually. He actually got it wrong. He put, or the publishers got it wrong and they put the wrong place in the wrong way. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So this is the revelation of Dorothy. I'm going to take you through a little walk through the map. Glinda, the good witch, explained to the girl, "The magic has been in your shoes all along. Think of the journey you've been on in Oz. A couple more clicks of those heels, you'll be home." Knackered, Dorothy heard, "Burden me less. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, girl." Yeah? Tell that to the wizard. He abandoned his subjects, 1,000 slaughtered oxen hides, stitched up by Emeraldians for one hot air balloon's great flight, green tinted specks still worn with pride. Sure, the wizard offered Dorothy's friends a trinket heart, a proxy mind, but showmen always offer more. More gifts, more tricks, more work, more lies. Dorothy had made the melted witch, dodged the yellow brick road covered in her dog shit, supported Winkies that slaved to raise a tin man, vetted monkeys couriering straw to a shill with no brain. She'd walked all that way to see in colour what she had seen in Kansas, and that the garish munchkins, Glinda's offer, the death of one woman, the making of another, now she understood. All the world was a place like home, and when she got back, she'd walk barefoot. Okay, that was the first one. That was the revelation of Dorothy. These are sort of what I'd call adventure maps. So you'd look at them and sort of go through them with whatever sort of slant you wanted to take. The first map, as I say, was modelled on Frank Baum's map, the actual author of The Wizard of Oz. And the second one is I'm just going to get it up for you. Is a map, a naval map, and you can see in pencil all the very faint writing. Well, that would have been on an original map, a depth in meters, so that ships could navigate their way through and know where to drop anchor and where was shallow and where was not. But I've substituted them for emotional depths. It's a slight pun in the title. Shouldn't really laugh about it. It's quite a serious thing for me, but there we go. Anyway, I should take you through a little walk on this one. This one's a little shorter. Emotional depths, or Doggerland as I call it, tend to. I went to Durham with a closed Hartlepool mind. Poured fuel on Flameborough, lit a Grimsby sight. Arson, Boston, then came the wash. And we saw an indefatigable bank. Yet still we tried to cross. Doggerland, dogged by insecurities, by mistrust. I'm so sorry. We never reached Fairney. Thank you very much, everybody. Hopefully you can see me now, and the shared screen has stopped. I'm just going to do a little quick rep. If anybody liked anything they saw, there we go. Poetry Maps, that's my Instagram, and then Twitter as well. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Lee. That was fantastic. Lovely to see how you are coming along with those poems. And @Poetry Maps is such a good Twitter handle, so easy to remember. Our next poet is Angelena Demaria. Angelina says that she likes writing and sharing poetry and telling tall tales. She's recently had poems published in Poetry Salzburg Review and Sentinel. Please welcome Angelena Demaria.
Hello, hi. I don't know if am I there?
You are.
Oh, great. Well, it's nice to see you all, or those of you I can see. My first poem I'm going to screen share, but I'll just briefly say it's taken from a real incident, although not in this country, and with smaller insects. So here we go, screen share. Tell me about the woman who had bees in her eyes. Well, she was a well for thirsty bees. She was better than Isaac's wife, a picture bearer of oases tripped in the desert when horizon's glamour shimmered the sand. She didn't realize she had bees in her eyes. All night grit. She thought sleep fled with the lover who no longer touched the flowers in her garden. What about bees? Those 3 bees in her eyes in the dark. In their whole life, 1 bee makes 1 teaspoon of honey. She'd tasted plenty, owed them a few tears from her oasis. Okay, and the next poem I'm going to read. And from Walthamstow, if you look over the marshes and the wetlands, you can see the city. So that's where this poem starts, although it isn't where it finishes. Going for gold. Gold over the marshes, shining on. Grey reservoirs have rose gold sheets. Ducks, foxes are mimosa. Cormorants' nests are sparkling crowns on their island trees. But thunder, growing louder, a giant's tread comes from the west, where landmarks live. A blue glass gherkin, a cathedral shard, red warning lights flash from canary cranes. The birds are gone, but we stand fixed, immobile, consequent of choice, our hands turned, arms, feet, legs turned, hearts and brains turned into gold. Midas says, we too made a bad wish. Earth shakes, waves the air. Too late our boat or Criven riders hear the million division bells confused by scheming, roused to warn, an invoiced tsunamis coming on. With glowing banks of storm, it rolls the compass points, inspects its gains. The empty mortgaged homes, the rice fields drowned in turquoise chemical pools, ice caps, aborted calves. It tramps the oceans, plastic bones, fires kindling forests, swaps farms, food and peace, for oil, floods, drought and war. Its greedy eye observes our moon of love, plans rocket sites, claims mineral rights, and billionaires plan fallback flights to Mars. But still we, paralyzed, stand blind to endings, blind to wondering, was this our wish? If not our children or our world, what did we hope to win? What have we loved so much? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelena. Two lovely poems, and thank you to Lee as well from Forest Poets. So now we have the two Sarahs, and our first reader is going to be Sarah Doyle, and here to introduce her is Sarah Westcott.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you everyone at Forest Poets, and thank you everyone who's come along tonight. And finally, thank you Angelena and Lee for those really inventive, tender poems. It was really wonderful to hear and see them. So I'm going to introduce Sarah Doyle to you. So Sarah Doyle is the Pre-Raphaelite Society's Poet in Residence and co-author of Dreaming Spheres, Poems of the Solar System. She's been published widely, winning the Wolverhampton Literature Festival Poetry Competition and the Holland Park Press's Brexit in Poetry, and runner-up in the Keats Shelley Poetry Prize 2019 and the Keats Shelley Essay Prize 2020. She was highly commended in the Ginkgo Prize for Eco-Poetry and in the Ford Prizes. And Sarah holds an MA in Creative Writing from Royal Holloway, and she's currently researching a PhD in Meteorological Poetry at Birmingham City University, which seems very appropriate for the weather today. Her beautiful pamphlet, which I have here it is, you can see, Something So Wild and New in This Feeling, is inspired by Dorothy Wordsworth's journals. It was published by V Press in March 2021, and it went to a second print run in just over a month of its release. And I just wanted to say, so Sarah's source materials, as she'll be telling you, are Dorothy Wordsworth's journals, and I think she's done something really astonishing. She's reached back to another woman writer who was born 250 years ago, and she's created with her own sensitive, acute ear and eye something fresh and beautiful. And these poems are very creaturely, they're full of weather and music, and the phrase making is Sarah's and Dorothy's, making something unique. So a warm welcome to Sarah. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah, for such a generous introduction. It's so lovely to be here with Forest Poets this evening, and enormous thanks and admiration to both Lee and Angelena for really fabulous guest readings this evening. I was absolutely enchanted by those maps in particular. I'm going to share my screen. I hope you can all see that. I'm assuming if I can't, you'll let me know. Great, I've got a thumbs up. Okay, that's fantastic. I will be reading poems from my pamphlet, Some Things So Wild and New in This Feeling, which emerged from my PhD researching the poetics of meteorology and was published by V Press in March of this year. All the poems here are collage poems inspired by Dorothy Wordsworth's journals. That is to say, I have created these poems by stitching together phrases and fragments that I've extracted from the journals, editing only lightly, adding no new words, and changing punctuation only where it was necessary to make sense. Even the poems' titles are taken from the journals. Dorothy Wordsworth was the sister of the poet William Wordsworth. Born in Cumbria in 1771, Dorothy lived much of her childhood away from her brothers with a variety of relatives after the Wordsworth parents died 5 years apart. She did, however, maintain a close bond with William, and the two eventually set up home together as adults, firstly in Dorset and then in Alfoxden, Somerset, before finally settling in Grasmere, Cumbria in 1771. Dorothy continued to live with William after his marriage in 1802, in their home at Dove Cottage and later at Rydal Mount. She suffered ill health later in life and was cared for by William and his wife Mary. Dorothy kept a journal for part of 1798 while still living in Alfoxden and wrote an account of a journey to Germany later that year, as well as writing a separate journal later in life. However, it's for the Grasmere journals that she's best known, and these begin in May 1800 and are maintained until January 1803, along with Dorothy's recollections of a tour made in Scotland that same year. Although not intended for publication, the journals offer us an intimate record of the Wordsworth's domestic lives and social interactions, whilst Dorothy's observations of the natural world are extraordinarily detailed and feel no less vital for the passing of time. It's these journals, those written between 1798 and 1803, that I've engaged with for these poems. Throughout the writing process, I remained committed to treating the source text with sympathy, sensitivity, and respect, to treat the journals ethically, and to always bear in mind that these were, originally, the private journals of another woman. In writing these poems, which are a hybrid of Dorothy's voice and my sensibilities, I've strived to remain true to the preoccupations and values that Dorothy exhibits in the ways she marvels at and cherishes the natural world around her. Phenomena such as birds, trees, insects, water, plants, and of course, the weather. I'm going to start with the book's first poem, which is a phrase I've extracted in its entirety and shaped on the page. I'm sharing it here alongside the book's cover because I think that my publisher, Sarah James, has created a beautiful image to illustrate the poem and to reflect the spirit of the collection. One only leaf upon the top of a tree, the sole remaining leaf, danced round and round like a rag blown by the wind. Following on from a single leaf, an entire tree. There are well over 200 mentions of trees in the journals, and this poem is also a complete journal entry that I've extracted in its entirety and reworked on the page. Under Silverhow. As we were going along, we were stopped at once, at the distance perhaps of 50 yards from our favourite birch tree. It was yielding to the gusty wind with all its tender twigs. The sun shone upon it, and it glanced in the wind like a flying, sunshiny shower. It was a tree in shape with stem and branches, but it was like a spirit of water. The sun went in, and it resumed its purplish appearance, the twigs still yielding to the wind, but not so visibly to us. The other birch trees that were near it looked bright and cheerful, but it was a creature by its own self among them. Dorothy was an enthusiastic gardener and grower with a keen observational eye and a great sensitivity for the rhythms of the changing seasons. Here's a poem that I've created from multiple extracts to reflect this. It's quite long, so I'm reading an abridged version this evening. Oh, that we had a book of botany. The fields are of their winter colour, branches of hollies pendant with their bright red berries, the bare branches of oaks thickened by snow, a solitary plant sheltered by bowers of trees. Ivy twisting round oaks like bristled serpents, snowdrops quite out but cold and winterly. How elegant were the wreaths of the bramble, the day cold, a warm shelter in the hollies. I transplanted some snowdrops, I sowed flowers, geraniums, scentless violets, anemones, small yellow flowers. I do not know their name. The spring advances rapidly. Pilewort spread out on the grass, 1,000 shiny stars. The hackberry very beautiful, the pansies full of flowers, gowans out, marsh marigolds in full glory. The hackberry blossoms are dropping off fast, almost gone. Barberries are in beauty. I brought home crab blossom, pearl-like chives. The hills heave and swell prettily. There were flowers of various kinds, the topmost bell of a foxglove, geraniums, daisies, 2 kinds of orchises, and the little celandine. The laburnums blossom freely in the shrubberies. The wood rich in flowers, a beautiful yellow, palish yellow flower. The bees are busy. Ranunculus, crowfoot, the grassy leaved rabbit-looking white flower, strawberries. Wood sorrel flower, anemone, scentless violets, all flowers now are gay and deliciously sweet, particularly the purple flowered clematis. I could not help admiring the excessive beauty. Roses and myrtle, herbs and flowers, 1,000 buds on the honeysuckle tree. Speedwell, that beautiful blue one, the colour of the blue stone or glass used in jewellery. The Michaelmas daisy droops, the ashes still green, all but one, but they have lost many leaves. The hedges leafless, the golden woods of autumn, quiet in their own tranquillity. There is a lot of weather in the journals, and many of Dorothy's entries are scaffolded with meteorological observations of the beginning and the end of the day. In particular, there are over 100 iterations of rain. This poem emerged in February 2020, which was a very wet month in Britain, much like this one, with lots of local flooding reported. Any repetitions in the poem are present in the journals. I've not recycled anything. In the book, this poem spans 2 facing pages and requires being turned through 90 degrees in the hand, but I'm going to display it conventionally here and make it slightly bigger. When the rain in the night, warm and mild after a fine night of rain. It was a warm, mild morning with threatening rain. Threatening for rain, but yet it comes not. A very warm, cloudy morning, threatening to rain. A rainy morning, a fine, mild rain, a sweet, mild, rainy morning. It rained very mildly and sweetly in the morning. Very rainy all the morning. A very rainy, or rather showery and gusty morning. A rainy morning. Rain comes on, a rainy morning. A threatening and rather rainy morning. A rainy morning, a very rainy day, a terrible rain, a violent storm of hail and rain, like a plain overflowed by heavy rain. Cold showers with hail and rain after a heavy rain. Rainy weather. It rained very hard, a rainy day. It gathered for rain, the raininess of the evening, a few scattering drops of rain, hail and wind and cold and rain, shaken by the raindrops falling. So very rainy, beaten by the rain, incessant rain from morning till night, a rainy morning, a very rainy day, heavy rain all night. It was a very rainy night, rain in the night. A few drops fell, but not much rain. All the heavens seemed in one perpetual motion when the rain ceased. Dorothy was an avid sky gazer, and there are many journal entries reflecting that. This poem borrows its title from the last line of When the Rain and is comprised of multiple journal entries. All the heavens. Venus first showing herself between the struggling clouds. Afterwards, Jupiter appeared. The crescent moon, Jupiter and Venus. Jupiter was very glorious, and one large star hung over the corner of the hills. Many stars were out. The clouds were moveless, and the sky soft purple, the lake of Rydal calm, Jupiter behind. Jupiter, at least we call him. We always call the largest star Jupiter. The moon was a good height above the mountains. She seemed far distant in the sky. There were 2 stars beside her that twinkled in and out and seemed almost like butterflies in motion and lightness. 3 solitary stars in the middle of the blue vault, 1 or 2 on the points of the high hills. I had time to look at the moon while I was thinking my own thoughts. The moon travelled through the clouds. The evening star and the glory of the sky. The reflections in the water were more beautiful than the sky itself, brighter than precious stones, forever melting away. The evening star sunk down, colours faded away. Jupiter over the hilltops, the only star, like a sun, flashed out at intervals from behind a black cloud. The moon appearing now half veiled, the stars sometimes hiding themselves behind greying clouds. A very bright moonlight night. Venus almost like another moon, lost to us long before she goes down the large white sea. The horned moon was set. A beautiful evening, very starry, the horned moon. The moon shone like herrings in the water, a silver boat. The moon had the old moon in her arms, in a black-blue vault. She sailed along, followed by multitudes of stars, small and bright and sharp. A very mild moonlight night, glowworms everywhere. Attended by Jupiter and Venus in their palest hues, the crescent moon, a silvery line, a thready bow. The moonlight lay upon the hills like snow. This next poem is another that I've created from multiple phrases, and I'm fairly convinced that a couple of the lines here are Dorothy describing those moments where the shapes of clouds remind us compellingly of other objects, although she never states this overtly. I've chosen to celebrate that ambiguity in my choice of title, which itself is collaged from 2 fragments. Go up with me to the ruin, the ambiguous ruin. I wanted much to go to the old ruin, upon the highest ridge of that round hill covered with planted oaks, the shafts of the trees show in the light like the columns of a ruin. Far, far off from us, in the western sky, we saw shapes of castles, ruins among groves, a great spreading wood, rocks and single trees, a minster with its tower, minarets and a round Grecian temple, the colours of the sky of a bright grey and the forms of a sober grey with a dome. You look through a long vista of steep and ruin-like rocks, the roaring of the waterfall and the solemn evening lights, exactly like the fractured arch of an abbey. Thrushes were singing, cattle feeding among green-grown hillocks about the ruins. Rock and ruin are so blended together that it is impossible to separate the one from the other. The ruin presides in state over the river. Speaking of making shapes, here's a fragment I extracted in its entirety and edited slightly to make into a poem on the page. beautiful to see. On the calm, hot night, little boats row out of harbour with wings of fire, and the sailboats with the fiery track which they cut as they went along, and which closed up after them with 100,000 sparkles and streams of glowworm light. Although Dorothy's gaze is often directed outwards, I wanted to create a poem from the journals that reflected the complexities of her inner life, and this is another poem consisting of multiple extracted fragments. A heart unequally divided. My heart was so full that I could hardly speak. Every question was like the snapping of a little thread about my heart. I sat a long time upon a stone at the margin of the lake, and after a flood of tears, my heart was easier. The lake looked to me, I knew not why, dull and melancholy, and the weltering on the shores seemed a heavy sound. My heart dissolved. I could not help weeping. I was sick at heart. In my walk back, I had many of my saddest thoughts, and I could not keep the tears within me. My heart was almost melted away. My heart smote me, prevented me from sleeping. I was melancholy and could not talk, but at last I eased my heart by weeping. Perhaps because of Dorothy's childhood separation from her brothers, notions of home and belonging permeate the journals. Here is the poem I made from a variety of fragments to reflect this. Although it's a short poem, it contains many of the things that seem to resonate for Dorothy: natural water, her garden, and of course, the moon. Homewards. We rowed home over a lake still as glass. The boatmen were in a hurry to be at home. The moon appeared and disappeared several times before I reached home. I came home at the foot of our own hill. As we came home, I picked up a few mosses by the roadside. It was dark before we reached home. When we came home, the fire was out. I was tired when I reached home and could not sit down to reading. Walked a little in the garden when I came home. We took home a great load of gowans. I brought home lemon thyme and several other plants and planted them by moonlight. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm going to finish with the final poem in the collection, another comprised of multiple phrases. And this evening I dedicate this to Sarah Westcott because Sarah very kindly critiqued the manuscript for me before I sent it to Sarah James. And she very, very politely and gently said that what was then the last poem in the manuscript didn't feel like the right note on which to finish the collection. And she spoke to me about stepping off lightly. And I really took her at her word, and I cut the final poem altogether and I wrote a brand new one just specifically for the ending. And I wanted to write a poem full of light in order to literally step off lightly. So with thanks to you all for listening, thanks to Lee and Angelena, and enormous thanks to Sarah Westcott, this is Lights and Shadows. We stood some minutes watching the swallows that flew about restlessly and flung their shadows upon the sun-bright walls of the old building. The shadows glanced and twinkled, interchanged and crossed each other, expanded and shrunk up, appeared and disappeared every instant, seeming more like living things than the birds themselves. The sun shone so brightly with such a fierce light that there was even something like the purity of one of nature's own grand spectacles. Rocks glittered in the sunshine, distant hills were visible, the evening sun was now sending a glorious light. Islanded with sunshine, bathed in golden light, my heart danced while the sun was yet shining. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And you're back in business because Sarah Doyle is now good to introduce Sarah Westcott.
Indeed I am. Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you all so much for listening. Well, it's my great pleasure to introduce Sarah. Sarah Westcott grew up in North Devon and is endlessly fascinated by the natural world and our relationship with it. Her first pamphlet, Inklings, was a Poetry Book Society pamphlet choice, and Slant Light from Pavilion Poetry 2016 was highly commended in the Forward Prize. Her second collection, Bloom, also with Pavilion Poetry, was published this spring. Liz Berry says of Bloom, "These beautiful poems pivot upon a strange, dazzling curiosity. They urge us to kneel in the long grass and pay tender attention to the spaces within nature and within ourselves where life blooms." Sarah was a news journalist for 20 years and now works as a freelance tutor and writer. She loves to see her poems out in the world, and work has appeared on beer mats, billboards and buses, baked into sourdough bread and installed in a nature reserve to be triggered by footsteps. I first encountered Sarah when I heard her read at a poetry event a few years ago. We followed each other on social media, and as is so often the way in the poetry community, we gradually developed a friendship. I admire Sarah's poetry enormously. Her eye for detail and her commitment to linguistic precision, her evocative but economical image making, and her sense of kinship with the non-human all combine to make Sarah one of our most compelling and relevant and original poetry voices. For a signed copy of Bloom or Slant Light, you can contact Sarah directly, and I'm going to pop her email address in the chat. So it gives me great pleasure to pass over to Sarah Westcott.
Thank you so much. That's probably the loveliest introduction I've ever heard. So thank you. And thank you for your really glorious reading. I think you'll see in the chat how people responded to your beautiful poems and how deftly you've worked with Dorothy's voice. So I'm just going to read for 15 minutes, and also I'm going to share my screen as well. So I shall just bring that up. And I thought I would start with a poem about the passenger pigeon. I think a lot of what I write about is interested in looking and seeing, and distances and closeness. And as you know, the passenger pigeon, it existed in its billions across North America, and now it's extinct. So this is a poem about the scale of it and how its droppings were apparently like snow. There were so many of them, and now there's just a kind of silence. So this is called Pigeons. A collared bird is drinking. It bows to the river. Water wets its crop. Dreaming has always moved in the skin of the river, the voiceless river, all throat. We granted a river the same rights as human, empathy, care, compassion. Words meet water and run with muddy meaning. The pigeon, light on its shoulders, a clean answer to the body. Space emerges around its flight. We read narratives of loss, remember feathered napes, dove grey, peach and gold, trees shaken by a living wind, the body of each bird very private. Wings are laced with sentiment, empathy is sweet to bear, liquid running over feathers, small bodies of water dying away into water. How to fade from the wheeling optics? Would you like to see everything all at once? So a lot of my new book, Bloom, is concerned with flowers, and I'm quite interested in the weight that flowers carry in a cultural sense. They're so kind of loaded down with femininity and kind of interpretations of beauty. And really, they're just these astonishing sexual parts of a plant. So I wanted to kind of revisit flowers and think about them in a more, I don't know, in a less kind of normal way. So this is a bunch of flowers, and they're just very short poems. Bunch, sunflower, stuffed his face with seed, gouty, corpulent, no space for dissent, or his teeth will fall out. Daisy, white slips falling, gold at the heart, also the making of all colours, fine white slips tipping her tongue. Move my page over. Pansy, violet seam, bruised cuffs, 3 faces in a little hood. Lily, dragging her bed sheets and weeping behind, pollinated bride. Tulip, hold me up, black eye at the bottom of my cup. Eggs and bacon, trefoil. Lift her literal hood, smell your breakfast cooking, glorious hobo. Meadowsweet, crowned that tipping summer, bow, bow down, torn beauty. Hogweed, croned in the quartered air, dancer flinging herself against the glass, the relief of letting arms fall to sinuate as leaf or leaf fall. Seed, a quiet host, dun and courteous, missive from the plant's dropped light, thin coin with the light through, I give it to nothing and no one. The word is honesty. So I was thinking about trees and all the extraordinary scientific discoveries that have been made about how they communicate, and the similarities and dissimilarities with the human body. So this is just a kind of reverie. Dancer. When I become a tree, where is the center of this decision? At the tip of each root, the tip of each branch, my brain is millions of buds picked out against the air. I am a shape of chemical channelings, electrical lengths, impenetrable and porous. I bow to this. We are gathered and flocked. I am a child forever. I drop and redress my hair. I drop my hands and I raise them to my mother. I remember the heart cold and dry bands of heat. And I open my body as a cone, each fingernail fanning from its core. As I said, I'm interested in the spaces and places between human and non-human or beyond human. And the artist Martin Roth, he almost created these spaces to make his own art with nature as a kind of active protagonist. So he would let flies go in galleries, and he did these extraordinary installations using living creatures. So this poem is inspired by him. Desert Holly. I collected a plant from the garden of a mass shooter, a desert holly with grey leaves, and moved some pieces of earth. I cultivated a forest clearing, nurtured by retweets. Every mouth was ringing. I filmed a bird driving, the loneliest bird in the shop. We drove to the Salton Sea. He held the wheel with his feet. The mice played Art Garfunkel on their wheels in the cage. I grew trees through the roof of my car. The fruit rolled down and I ate some. I grew grapes on rugs in a castle. We were ruinous. I grew corn for a plant concert. Our heads were levelled pipes and organs. I released 3 flies in a mole. In the moments of leaving, they were blue, gold, and green. I had in mind clean shadows. They touched my face like a child. So this is the only found poem in my book. And obviously I wanted to read it to echo Sarah's practice. And I basically took phrases from the diaries of Gilbert White, and I was interested in looking for this spirit of green and a kind of upswelling. And I almost wanted to find something sensual in his diaries. And I don't think you associate that necessarily with Gilbert White's work. So this is about a spirit of kind of new growth. And I should say it's got the word edicnemus in it, which, if you don't know, is a stone curlew. Small rain, a cento. Last night I heard that short, quick note of birds flying in the dark. If this should be the voice of edicnemus, I accuse this bird of making sad havoc. Sky thickens with flisky clouds. The hotbed streams very much. A starving widgeon settled yesterday and was taken. Quick-set hedges begin to leaf. I sowed the border with upright larkspurs, a fine sort. The green woodpecker laughs in the fields of Vauxhall. The male bloom of the cucumbers opens. The bed is warm and the plants thrive. My brother's cucumbers are strong and healthy. A vast snake appears at the hotbeds. Several fruit have bloom in the first bed, and all the little blandishments are open. So it's spring, apparently. This is a very springy poem. Inconsolable green. Green the touched wood, pods, tongues, soft green explosions. Green the hood, the egg, the gut, an old eye. Green the pelt, green the snails, green the weed between the words, green the green sidle to heaven, ear to the hide, hearts stowed. Green the mall, every cocked finger, green wiped down the sides and in the cubicles, hearkening, kneeling. Greenly we come the truth to green, looped breath, perpetual singing. Nothing but the gumming green up through the teeth, green bells beckoning. Still green, polar green, some sick uprising, sap, ichor, courage, unbiddable gill. Dearest green, inconsolable green, contrail spinning mid lime and mint green light. Green the crooning, croon the throne song now. So just two more poems. The spring fragments speak for themselves, really. I wrote them this time a year ago. I just kept a little diary, and they're just about perception and the limits of language. Wednesday afternoon. A quiet, still grey cup, dove grey the content, limpid, pensive, creamed, so abstracted, light comes, blue tint. 29th of March. Everyone inside like eggs, soft, wet egg in the shell, sliding up and down smooth insides. A man's face is shaved so cleanly, it is smooth as an egg and expressionless. 31st of March. The wound of each hour, blossom at our feet is bright, foaming from the graves. 4th of April. My son, pesto breath, all my other selves piled up, swatches on a spike. Some date in April. Red damselfly still in the sun. Long flopping body, walnut in flower with long extended catkins, my breasts as I walk, outlines of bodies under cloth, the sound of bicycle wheels louder than cars. Birds are quiet, feeding their young, incessant attention. An egg tooth taps, insistent, until I feel myself breaking through. I think of arms like catkins. I think of keys, of tiny fetishizations, of undistinguished things, seeds, water butts, palpable concerns. Drawing a sunflower. Each day I wake into a yellow entity. The central disc is textured with hooks, a density of expression. The yellow flames are a decoy. The dark disc is energy, investment, blind investment in this mode of holding. The leaves are easier, a little tattered, their shape in the pen almost water. Put me down again upon the earth, more resistance in the paper. 1st of May. A cuckoo, soft and plaintive, eternal and plaintive, two-toned woody fallings, counterbalanced, strange. So thank you, everyone. This is my final poem, and I wanted a poem about wildness, thinking about Sarah's pamphlet and the spirit of that. So this is about the wildness inside all of us, and it's called Owls. I carry the owls with me, deep in my pocket or tucked in the cup of my bra. They doze, bills dipped in a bib of feathers, turn janglesome if I forget they are there when I run for the bus. They come with me to work, warm-blooded and tickly. We sit in the road, the owls and I, lost in the dwining day, the failing sun a shinacle over the town. I carry their flight over dreaming hills, hollow bones lifting and keening. They gowl for slumgullion, cagmag, fresh mice, get shifty as we reach the back country, tear through my blouse, glide over the spinney, searching, searching. I carry the owls with me still, in vellum and in sepia. I carry them on my tongue and I feed them to our children. May they carry the owls for us all, their darknesses, their eyes. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and coming along tonight, and especially thank you to Paul and Forest Poets. And I'm going to hand back to Paul now.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And if everybody would like to come off mute, you can give the two Sarahs and our Forest Poet readers a big round of applause, please. Thank you to Lee Mackenzie, Angelena Demaria, Sarah Doyle and Sarah Westcott,